Hello, this is Professor Brown Cedarburg, and I'd like to demonstrate a simple for loop. I've developed this class, named it DemoForLoop, and the class consists of this main method. Now within the main method, I've got an int, I've named sum, and I've given a value of 0. And I've done that because I'd like this for loop to add up the numbers from 1 through a number, and I've taken it as 10, and add them up and put them into sum. And then to list, as I'm doing this, the values that are being added and the sum that's the result. So here I have my sum. I've given an initial value of 0. I'm going to print to the screen this string I. I'm going to tab over and then sum. I that's being printed out is not a value of I, but just the character I. This is a string that's being printed to the screen. This provides my headings to my columns because I'm going to print to the screen the value of I and the value of sum as I go through my for loop. So here's my for loop. I have my initialization. I declare int I and give it a value of 1. Here's my test. I'll go into and continue to execute this loop as long as I is less than or equal to 10. And upon each execution of the loop, I'll increment I. So my loop itself is 2 lines. My first line is I'll find the value in sum, add to it the value in I, and overwrite the value in sum. I'll then print out the value of I, tab over, and then print out the value in sum. That brings me to the end of the loop. We go back up, we increment I, we test I. If the test is true, we go into the loop, etc. So if we look at this loop, here I've established I to have a value of 1, and I'll test. As long as I is less than or equal to 10, I'll continue in this loop, or enter it in the first place. Now, this means that I'm going to go through this loop 10 times. I establish I equal to 1, my relationship here is less than or equal to 10, and I'm incrementing I each time I go through the loop. I'll execute this loop 10 times. So what I'll have as a result of execution of this loop is a heading for 2 columns. One will say I and one sum, and then the values I of I, which will start at 1 and go through 10, and the values of sum that will start at 1 and go through, we'll find 55. So let's compile this program, and then we'll run it. And as we run it, we see that we have our headings I and sum, and then here the values I of I 1 through 10, and the values of sum 1 through 55. The way this loop goes is I come into it, I establish my I, give it a value of 1. I do my test. Is I less than or equal to 10? It is. I go into my loop. I add I to sum, overwrite sum, and then print out. So the first time through, my I is a value of 1. I test it. I go into the loop. I add I to what's in sum. Sum has a value of 0, so sum now has a value of 1. I print out the value of I and the value of sum. That's what we see here, 1 and 1. I've executed this loop, so I'll update. Here's my update. I'll increment I. I started off with a value of 1. I increment it, now is a value of 2. I test. Is I less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. I go into my loop. I take the value of I, that's 2, add it to what's in sum, that's 1, put it into sum, that's 3. I then print out the value of I and the value of sum. We see that I have it here. Here's the value of I, 2, and the value of sum, that's 3. I'll continue iterating through this loop as long as I is less than or equal to 10. Once it isn't, I'm out of the loop. And so we'll see that my output is here, my values of I from 1 to 10, my values of sum from 1 to 55. That's a simple for loop. And we remember with a for loop, it's counter-controlled. And I control how many times I go through the loop with this initialization, this my test, and this my update. Here I've set my value of I to be 1. My value here, my relationship, is less than or equal to. So that means I'll go through this loop this number of times, 10 times. I'm incrementing each time I go through the loop. One of the challenges of for loops is to have them execute the number of times that you want them to. And we control that with this statement right here. Thank you very much.